For more analysis on the negotiations and what comes next, we're joined now by Sundeep Gokhale. He's a labor lawyer and partner at Sherrard Cruz LLP. Sundeep, thanks so much for making time for us today.
Thanks for having me.
Sundeep, to the best of your knowledge, what is WestJet offering the flight attendants and the union, and why is the union rejecting it?
Well, the union, CUPE's in a position right now where they're saying we want our members to be paid for all of the time they spend on the ground prior to Wheels Up and Wheels Down in terms of being compensated. And so they've really dug their heels in, and they have a clear mandate from their membership to fight as hard as possible to make sure that the flight attendants get paid for that work. And that's really the sticking point right now.
Sundeep, maybe you can help me understand something that I don't see how we got to this position. So the labor movement has been around a lot longer than the aviation industry has. How did we begin the process where flight attendants were expected to do work on the ground and not get paid for it?
Well, airlines like to ensure that they know the exact costs of what it's going to take to operate a plane. And part of the challenge that the airlines have is some of the delays that happened at airports have nothing to do with them. It could be another airline carrier, it could be mismanagement at the actual airport. And they're saying, well, if we're stuck on the runway or on the tarmac, why is it, why are we now having to bear the brunt of the cost for that? And that includes cost to the airports as well as additional labor costs. And so they've traditionally liked to take the position that Wheels Up, Wheels Down, that's what they get to control, and it's entirely in their control. And so in their historic viewpoint has been that's what they want to ensure that they pay for.
If the flight attendants on average were compensated appropriately for the work that they do before and after the flights land, how much more money are we talking about? How much more would they earn?
Well, CUPE has gone public with their analysis to say, flight attendants are working up to about 35 hours a month of unpaid time when you factor in all of those costs. Now, that hasn't been verified. WestJet has different numbers in terms of what they're relying upon. But the reality is that there is a significant amount of time that, flight attendants are stuck on planes or doing safety checks, or having to deal with some unruly customers during that period of time when the plane's on the ground. And it's during that period of time that a flight attendant is simply saying, compensate us for that period of time.
Sundeep, how similar is this situation to where we were almost exactly a year ago with Air Canada?
Yeah, it's deja vu all over again. I think what CUPE is taking the position right now is, look, we've been through this. That issue went to an interest arbitration decision, and in February of this year, an arbitrator decided that part of that time in terms of the groundwork ought to be compensated. And in that decision, the arbitrator ultimately said flight attendants get paid anywhere between 50 and up to 70% of their hourly rate for that period of time of up to 60 minutes or 70 minutes, depending on the type of plane. And I think CUPE is taking the position that says, look, the precedent's been set, we want that as well.
In this situation where we find ourselves now, the strike is taking place, the flights are grounded. Does either party have the upper hand?
Not really. I mean, CUPE's made their analysis. I mean, they've been emphatic in terms of their messaging today. We've heard from CUPE. They're saying, WestJet knows what we want. We've made it very clear since bargaining started. I think the issue right now is going to be whether or not the federal government intervenes and, forces the parties back to work and allows this matter to go to interest arbitration like we saw with Air Canada. I think that's the issue right now. And CUPE wants to ensure that they maintain their right to strike. And so they're probably hoping for not government intervention. And hopefully they feel as though they can leverage the strike to try and ultimately get what they want for their membership, which is that ground pay to be paid for.
The Air Canada strike last year lasted 4 days. The federal government, as you mentioned, did get involved. What do you think with this one? Will it go as long or longer? Will the government step in?
I think the government's going to allow the parties a little bit of time for the rest of the day today, but I would not be surprised if over the next 24 hours the federal government starts to tip the scales a little bit, get involved, and put some pressure on the parties before it ultimately exercises its discretion to, force the matters back to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board.
And Sundeep, with this story, much like Air Canada, there's this interesting dichotomy for so many people who are affected, the travelers who've been affected, that two things are true at the same time. They're really frustrated that they can't get on board their flights, but they're deeply empathetic and supportive of the flight attendants. And so when it comes to the labor movement, particularly with your expertise as a labor lawyer, is this causing an awakening for the public in terms of how people should be compensated for their work?
I think it is. I think you're right. The public does believe that flight attendants should be paid. Anyone who flies sees the work that they do before and after a flight takes off or lands, and ultimately scratches their head in terms of why they're not getting some sort of compensation for that period of time. I think the challenge right now, of course, is Canadians and people relying on the airlines have lost thousands of dollars in ancillary costs, hotels, tour guides, that sort of thing, which aren't necessarily covered or addressed by WestJet itself.
And Sundeep, I noticed we're speaking to you today from Barcelona, Spain. Did you take WestJet to get there?
I did not.
Okay. So you're in good shape then.
I'm okay right now.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and we'll check in with you again. Have a good trip.
Thank you. Thank you.